Okay, my friend Steve Selvage from the Hold Steady brought me two of his 63 historic 335s from the Memphis Custom Shop, and I showed the details of doing the first one. This one is much the same inside, only I use the Mojo Tone vintage taper pots as opposed to the RS Super Pots because the Mojo Tones are back in stock, and I think they're just as good. So this is also redone to 50s wiring. And the reason this needed to be redone was this guitar had a field repair by someone who was, yeah, as far as I could tell, evil. And I think it was on the neck. I don't remember his neck or bridge. I think it was on the neck. The cap in the tone stack that runs between the volume and the tone pot had broken, just like on the first one, because it's a weak physical connection. And the field repair was to replace that capacitor with a single bit of wire where the capacitor used to be. So instead of this being a tone pot, it was a secondary volume pot, so useless. But because it was always connected to this volume pot, it changed the loading. When you have a 500K tone pot with a cap between it or between it and ground, you don't load this the pickup or the output as much, but by having two 500Ks always connected by that wire, it had a 250K load essentially, which is way too much of a load, and the pickup response was dark and weak. So now this is back to 500Ks. It's got some small film 22s. Like I showed in a previous small video, these are the Stu Mac Parsons Street pickups. It's got about a 7.5K Alnico 5 in the neck and about a 9K Alnico 2 in the bridge. I think they sound really nice. I did 50s wiring on this, and I'll show you what I mean by that. A lot of mythology is on the net about 50s wiring. All it is, in a nutshell, is that the wiper of the volume control is connected to the tone circuit rather than the input of the volume control, which means as you turn the volume down, well, this one's all the way down, as you turn the volume down, the tone circuit loads down the pickup less. It's all about impedance and load. So as you turn the volume down, you lose less highs. And that's true for both pickups. I'm not going to do a A-B switch comparison because that's a lot of work on a hollow body. I'm going to link in the description below a video that a guy who runs A2 guitars did, which is a great comparison and explanation. And he's got a whole series on guitar volume and tone controls and capacitors and stuff. And he's absolutely right. It's a very scientific approach. It's not snake oil or snake oil and paper, as a lot of people out there try to sell you caps and wiring harnesses are. Other advantage of 50s wiring, and this is specifically for, I'd say, rock, modern country, and blues, is if you do roll your tone control down, as you roll the volume down, that tone control does less and less. Now this is through a deluxe reverb, which is a fairly clean amp. If this were a Marshall, and I go from 10 on the volume to 3 on the volume, that's enough of a level change from the pickup for the amp to start cleaning up, and with the tone control less in the circuit, when I roll back it gets clean and brighter. And then I turn it up and it gets louder and smoother. Now, if this were for a jazz player who always plays to a clean amp, I would use linear taper for the volumes, because with these in audio taper, a huge amount of the controls between 10 and 8. And with linear taper, what's happening between 10 and 8 here is happening between 10 and about 4.5 or 5. So you have a much greater range of control of full volume to slightly less. If you had that same linear taper pot through a Marshall, and you want to do that cleanup thing that's about 2.5 or 3 here, well, it's just above 0. And it's just a really bad range of control with the linear taper pot through a, let's call it a rock and roll amp. For jazz, linear taper makes a lot of sense. I don't usually care for linear taper tone controls, because all the change happens between 0 and 1. Whereas here, the dramatic change happens between 0 and 2, but there is an audible change. New pot. Something in the room is rattling. What is that? Oh, that's those panels for those AC-30s that came in the other day. The screws are in the panels and they're on the floor. I need to move those someplace better. So I pronounce this guitar healthy. It's all intonated. I did have to raise the tailpiece because the strings, the low E and the high E, were touching the back of the saddle as it came in. Not the back of the saddle, the back of the bridge. And so you had 2 witness points. You had a point of contact at the saddle and a point of contact on the back of the bridge, and that's an additional point of friction. So I had to raise this up a little bit. If the owner really wants this all the way down to the body, he needs to look at top wrapping. Just because of the neck angle on this is where this bridge needs to be. And because it had an extreme behind the bridge angle and higher tension before, this bridge is partially collapsed, and the nylon saddles that Gibson uses these days are softer than the old ones, and the strings have really embedded deeply in there because of that behind the saddle angle and pressure. So if this were my guitar, I'd top wrap it and I'd get new nylon saddles and maybe just replace the bridge. It's not worth this 90s or I guess 2000s ABR1 is not worth rebending. Just replace it. But other than that, and the neck's got a little bit of a rise in here. It needs a fret level and dress, but that's beyond what I do. So I declare this guitar open.